So, Rachel, do you ever have on a weekend like a walk and talk? Do you walk and talk?
I do. I actually have a regular walk and talk on Fridays usually.
Okay, so my husband and I love to just go out and just sort of like come up with ideas, right? Like whatever strikes us. It might be related to real estate in New York City. It might be related to some app that he's decided he wants to vibe code. It could
Mhm.
really be about anything, but it's my favorite time to sort of just be creative and come up with ideas.
I love that. I think that that's so smart. Even okay, I'm not going to get off of on a tangent because I know we have a topic in mind, but I have a lot of opinions about boredom walks, which I've recently discovered, which is basically like stop listening to things, stop trying to like put stuff in your brain, just let your brain do what it wants to do. And I think that your example is a perfect way of how to do that with someone else.
It really is. So let's talk about ideation today, right? That's our
That's it.
topic of the day.
Yeah, there's been a lot of conversations, at least in my sphere, about ideation recently. And we were even at a networking event a few weeks ago, and that seemed to be the hot topic. I don't know if even, people I'm talking to know that they're in ideation, to be honest, but they are because they're trying to work through things. They have ideas, they have questions, they're sort of in this like beautiful bounty of possibility. And I think this is the perfect time to talk about what makes you an ideation stage and how do you get out of it? Because a good business owner or a good business founder, good startup won't stay there. They'll move on.
Yes, that is always my favorite part is how do we take it from idea to actual execution and reality. Welcome to Managed Chaos Podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Katrina Purcell,
And I'm Rachel Anderson.
and today we're going to talk about ideation. I think this is so fun because, especially in times of sort of economic uncertainty, or, a lot of people are becoming sort of disillusioned with the corporate world. I feel like there's ideas flowing from everywhere, right? People are coming up with ways to have a side hustle. People are coming up with ways to kind of change and upend how normal life is going.
Mhm.
So, Rachel, how do people identify that they're in the ideation stage?
So I think that if you're swimming in ideas, especially, it's a good indication that you have something to say on the ideation front. I think that, when you're looking at adding a product to your portfolio or even having some sort of new business venture, whether you've done it before or this is your first time, this is a really, really important stage not to skip. And I think that if you are kind of in this land of ideas, which I love living in the land of ideas, welcome then it is a really good thing to kind of embrace, but also identify. And that's where I think, if you're problem spotting here and you don't have a lot of answers, it's a good indication you're there and you should name it. If you're experimenting in your head with what this could look like, what it could be called, what it might be practically built out, then you're definitely in ideation. You're looking for validation or even how to invest money or the fact that you even need money and that conversation happening. All of that kind of indicates that you're in ideation. And ultimately, your excitement should be unparalleled in this moment of time. Like it should just be all consuming for you. But I think it's a really important thing to cognitively wonder, am I in ideation, and claim it so that you know that this is a stage. And as all stages do, they come to an end and you should look for when it's right to move on.
So, how can you thrive in that ideation stage rather than becoming sort of overwhelmed at all the possibilities and the uncertainty behind them?
It's a good question because not all people do well in that uncertainty. I think that for me, thriving doesn't necessarily mean you have to have the perfect idea, quote
Mhm.
unquote. Which I think a lot of people get stuck up on, right? Like, I have to have it all figured out. It has to be absolutely right or perfect, or I have to know for sure it's going to work out. And unfortunately, if that's kind of the place you're in, I would gently encourage you to wonder and get curious about if startup life is right for you, because that's never going to be. the way that it is in startup. Or at least if it is, it's going to be such a rarity, like a true unicorn, not these like financial unicorns we see, but like actually so rare. Really, it means getting the most out of this creative, messy, chaotic space. And so if you're here and you're like, how do I do the best I can in this kind of moment? I would say there's a few tips. I'm going to give it just a couple tips on what you should do to really make the most of the moment. And again, I want to emphasize that moment could be a couple days, it could be a couple years. I mean, people sometimes need time for it to marinate, but there should always be sort of a intent to be into something else. So the first is my favorite, which is just give yourself permission to play. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have all the information.
Mhm.
Let other people speak into it with you. Be creative. Explore possibilities. Think about it in different contexts. Maybe it's like, oh, in this industry, it would look like this. In this industry, it would look like this. What if it's purple? What if it's blue? What if we had a dragon coming out of it? Like, whatever that looks like, to be really creative in the process of weeding out things, even just give yourself permission to do that, just to be there and to have the ideas and the excitement about the ideas. The other thing I briefly mentioned is that you should really stay curious. And I think it's easy for people with ideas to sometimes get critical of their idea really early on. And it kind of pigeonholes the process because it makes you assume that something is not good when that could just be your opinion. It could be a friend's opinion. It could be an observation, but not a reality. I have talked to a lot of leaders. And
Yes.
granted, these are usually ones that you see down the line a little bit. They're seasoned, they're like used to the way things are, that suddenly stop being curious. And it becomes very obvious when an outsider comes in that there's certain quick wins you can have because they've already discounted those as bad ideas or not valid or whatever it looks like. Which, just as a side note, is I think normal and is why you have consultants and coaches and all that kind of stuff. So that's a great use of that. But you can ask questions like what if rather than why not, to kind of frame how you're curious in a way where it's encouraging. And then the final thing I would say is don't keep it to yourself. Like, talk to people about your idea, get
Yeah.
outside input. And I know we get nervous about, like, this is my precious idea. And what if somebody takes it? But let me tell you, it takes so much time, effort, money, ability, knowledge, passion, all the things to steal your idea, especially in ideation stage. So definitely talk to people and honestly prototype. It could be a paper napkin at a bar. It could be the back of a coffee jacket at your favorite coffee shop. Like it just make it in the world so that other people can start giving you ideas and information that helps shape this if it's good or not good or needs to tweak or change. And then set your
I
deadline and reach for it.
I totally agree with that. So often I meet with founders and they don't want to really talk about the idea because they're so worried that someone will steal it. And in even in business school, you talk about, okay, strategy is one thing, but the execution on the strategy is really what matters, right? That's the
Yeah.
secret sauce. Actually, bringing the idea to life is what will make you money, and that's what's going to make the idea, have legs. I think it's funny too because not everybody's going to think about bringing the idea to life in the same way, right? And so even
Right.
if someone takes your idea, what they do with it might be completely different than what you're planning on doing with it. So, what does come next from this ideation phase? How do you start to shape that idea into something that becomes reality?
Yeah. I think that there's like a few things that you want to do as next steps. The first is validation, which we started to kind of trickle into.
Mhm.
You just pick one of your ideas and test it. This could mean running a survey with your friends and family or colleagues or peer group. It could be pitching it to a couple different customers if that's something that you can do, if it doesn't need like a physical prototype or something like that.
Hmm.
You could even put up a landing page and gauge some interest and start putting that out there if you're a little bit more, digital savvy and you want to try that route. This definitely comes back into the you have to talk about it in order to validate it. So I think that that's definitely a key point that you should consider. Also, there's got to be a little bit of commitment. So, like I said, you really want to choose the idea that has the most traction and energy and really commit to exploring it further. This is where you start to move from that like dreaming space into actually building. I also kind of want to mention here, as far as like traction and energy, there are a lot of really great, incredible ideas in the world, but not all of them will make money. And it's
Also very true.
yeah, yeah. And listen, I'm really good at doing business for free. Okay, I love it. It's one of my favorite pastimes, apparently. But like, not all ideas are going to be fruitful, and it doesn't. I also want to iterate on that and say that $5 is good. That means your idea makes money, but that's not enough to live on. So if you're thinking about like, is this a good idea? That's the first checkbox. Is this an idea that will make money? That's another checkbox. And then is this enough money to actually make a company out of and live on? Those are, think of that in the scope of traction and energy for your commitment. And then the next piece is kind of this early execution. You want to start by creating the simplest version. We called it an MVP, the most viable product. Think of it like the least common denominator from math. Like the simple. What can I do to do the least to get it out the door in order to actually have a thing and get it into people's hands? Because again, that goes back into validation. Once you can get that next step out there, people can
Hmm.
tell you what needs to change, what needs to pivot, what needs to be doubled down on because it's so great. And then finally, you will never launch V1 and be done. No company in the history of the entire universe has ever launched its first product and been like, okay, I'm done. We're good. It'll never need to change. And so don't get stuck in the preciousness of your baby. One of my team members several years ago, she was a graphic designer. She was so fantastic. She used to say, "Don't kill my darlings." But I was like, which is really, it's a lot when you hear it for the first time, but it just means like I worked on this so much, it's so precious, but like I know I have to do it. It's okay. And so you have to kind of hold it with open hands, because in that iteration and your feedback as you're listening to people, those are the most important things to help you guide the process and the structure and the path forward for success for your product idea or service.
Exactly. So what if you're one of those people who just gets, and this is not me at all because
Mhm.
I'm not the idea person, but what if you never get out of the ideation phase? What if you can't bring yourself to kind of move beyond ideas?
Okay. I'm going to say this with all the love in my heart because I too am an ideas gal. If you need a business idea, I can spin you up 10 at any given moment. It's okay if you don't want to ever leave ideation. It just means you don't have a business and you're not doing a thing. You're just helping creativity and ideas see life and breathe, and you're dreaming and exploring possibilities. And I want to normalize that it's not for everybody. It's okay for you to say, I don't really want to do it. I might want someone else to do it. I think it's a good idea, but I love the dream more than the do.
And I think just find someone who likes the do, right?
Yeah, one
I mean, I think that's
that yes.
right. Complementary skills. I think that's something that I'll join a good ideation session,
Yeah.
but I think the only time I have good ideas is when I'm coming out of anesthesia. I tried to design Uber for dogs, and my husband thought I was dumb. And by the way, it's like a real thing. You can get
I
an
love it.
Uber
Oh
for your
my
dog
gosh, I
these
love
days.
it.
All
That's
right. Well,
amazing. I do wanna say, though, it's okay also to decide your idea is bad in ideation stage and leave it behind. That is also success for ideating. So, either way, but I like your idea about doer because that's definitely a good counterpart.
all right. So that's a wrap on this episode of ManageCast Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. You can follow and subscribe on YouTube to help us reach a ridiculous goal that I set this year. You can also follow or subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we will talk to you on the next episode of Manage Chaos Podcast.